Few of us would be willing to give up the convenience of structures made with aggregate, such as bridges, roads and buildings, but we also don't want the damage to the environment that can be caused by quarrying. So that was a dilemma that Winstone Aggregates took to heart and put quite a bit of thought into a solution for that problem. So one of the ways that we progressed it was to team up with Tonkin and Taylor, an environmental consultancy firm led by Dr. Graham Usher, to help develop a program that ensures all of the activities across all of our sites throughout the country result in a net environmental benefit for the environments that they work in. So we developed a series of tools to first assess the biodiversity assets that we have on our sites. So basically standing back and saying what is on and around our sites, and what animals, plants are there, and what values are associated with them for the society. And then how do we manage them better to turn the undesirable effects of quarries into desirable effects. So instead of putting the focus on removing vegetation or animals to get aggregate out, we say, well, how can we improve the resources we've got left to more than account for the negative effects we're having. So turning the negatives into a positive, looking at it from a holistic view with measured tools that we developed. And it's all about net gain. It's a large part of our program now.
Yeah, well, the vegetation management plan, which is the driving management document for all the good things that Winstones are doing on that site, it's got three components. So one are the rescues of the wildlife on the site ahead of the removal of vegetation where the pit's going to be. The second part is replanting parts of retired farmland, so to recreate forest in areas nearby to where it's being removed. And the third aspect is to improve parts of the forest that are nearby by doing pest control, so that it's another way of getting benefits that outweigh the loss of native vegetation within the pit. The Hunua ranges are home to a whole range of wildlife, so birds such as the kingfisher, kereroo, kokako, shining cuckoo, tui, fantail, grey warbler, frogs and lizards such as Hochstetter's frog and our endangered Auckland green gecko and forest gecko. And all of these things are in danger of disappearing from the forest if we don't control pests. So as far as the pest control aspect of the program, there are two types of pests: animal pests and plant pests. Plant pests are non-native in New Zealand. They grow to such abundance that they displace native plants, and native plants aren't able to fulfil their proper ecological role. It's a huge problem in New Zealand, and it's something that we've inherited from past generations that have lived here, to the point that we've got 25,000 species of exotic plants in this country, and a lot of those are starting to become pests that need to be controlled.
When we've determined the area that we need to do some weed control in, we'll either stand back from a distance and observe what sort of weeds are around, or we'll go in and just visually identify the nature of the problem in the area. From that we'll determine the best method approach to tackle the weeds. It might be that we come in with a helicopter and get at them from the air. Maybe it's the vehicle-based spraying method, or maybe it's a more targeted method where we will come in and actually cut the individual plant out and probably poison the stump of it, so that we're actually only removing a particular plant in an area, thereby leaving all the other plants unaffected and able to come away again on their own.
So beside plant pests, what people need to realise is that Hunua Quarry is in the rural fringe of Auckland, so it's quite close, and it's got a whole range of animal pests that need to be controlled as well if we want to bring the bird life back to these forests in the long term.
So you wouldn't know it, but there's Norway rats, ship rats, mice, rabbits, goats, hedgehogs, deer, possums, all present at the Hunua site, and they're all either eating the wildlife or they're eating the native plants to a level that just isn't sustainable. So they should be controlled if we want to have a future for the rest of the forests in that area.
Once we moved on to looking at the vertebrate pests or the animal pests in the area, the first stage in the process was to try and identify what was around. To do this effectively and quantifiably, we put out monitor cards. These were put in the stations that were spread out 10 to a line, and there's 6 lines put across the block. These cards, they're a piece of white cardboard with some black ink in the centre of it. And what we do is we put about half a teaspoon of peanut butter, the universal attractant for virtually everything, and put that in the centre of the sink. We put it out on a good clear night, dry night, and come back the following morning and lift the cards. And what you find is that any animals in the area, or anything that can move in the area, will come across, it'll track through the ink, be attracted to the peanut butter, and then it will leave sign as it leaves the ink again and exits the card. And from the sign that's there, we're able to determine the nature of the animals present and get a pretty good idea of the population densities of them as well. Once we'd got an idea of the sort of animals present and the numbers, we then proceeded to charge the bait stations. We would charge the station with one full length of bait, and then every 2 or 3 days, going out to about a week, just depending on how the take was going, we'd come along and we'd check each of the stations and recharge them. And this time we used a bait that was 1/3 the length, and we record the amount of those segments that we had to put into the station and use that as an indication of the amount of bait that was being taken. In some cases it was a complete clean out. In many cases it was only 1 or 2 segments we required to recharge the station. Ultimately you get to a point where there is virtually no or very, very little take at all, and that's when you know that you're pretty much on top of what's in the area.
Feral deer and goats were quite common across the Hunua Quarry property when we commenced the mitigation program. The major concern with feral deer and goats were that they basically roam around and selectively browse the youngest vegetation as it grows up, and essentially prevents the bottom tier of the forest ever reaching maturity, so you end up with quite an impoverished state, which is what we found across most of our native forest here on the site. The hunter we approached to carry out further deer and goat control on the site was a guy by the name of Billy Curnow. Really great character, really passionate about his job. He's a professional hunter. He does contracts for DOC throughout the country as well as private organisations. He brought his daughter as well as an off-sider from his other DOC work, and we really started having a lot more success there with more numbers, more people on the ground, planning our attacks essentially, like small-scale military operations, and started getting the results that we were hoping for, so it was good.
But at the end of the day, it's what we're seeing above us here with the pigeons flying around and the other bird life that we see. That's what the role's about. It's creating that environment, that habitat that these guys can survive and thrive in. It's neat. When you're out in the bush, it's really neat to see.
One of the truly great experiences for me in the project was walking along one of our main pest control tracks, seeing all the little vegetation coming away, all the seedlings that wouldn't have been there had we not have done the pest control, coming out, seeing wood pigeons sitting eating a pigeon woodberry on the edge of the track and overlooking quite a large area of native replanting that we'd done 2 years ago that was at the stage now where it's supporting itself indefinitely. And now look at the results, you can see them, and it's great, and my grandkids will be able to come back and stand in the same spot and see the results in even much grander scale, and that's what it's all about for me.
I think what is really deeply satisfying about this project is that I know that from having this pit on site, the Simons Hill pit, that the environment will end up being in a better place overall. Setting to one side that you've got some environmental removal that's caused this part of that, but where you're looking at benefiting, balancing the benefits for society and the environment, then this is a winner.